Well, I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into, because I'm going to ask you to tug on your tights and oil your chest, as I think we need to have a little bout of wrestling. We've returned to the 8-bit era in this video with the WWF's original boom time of the late 80s and early 90s, a time when bananas weren't meant to be eaten but worn under your nose, when sunglasses were designed to not only protect your eyes but also apparently your cheeks and your forehead. And of course it was a time when wrestlers had side hustles as morticians, Canadian law enforcers and tax accountants. And while in the arcade there was plenty of fun to be had with Vinnie Mac's merry circus of greased up muscle men, in the home, be it on your microcomputer, your 16-bit powerhouse console or your trusty 8-bit machine, well, things were a bit more wrestling match between two fat guys in a village hall than the grandest stage of them all in terms of quality. So what is this steel caged thing anyway? Are the wrestlers naughty toddlers who keep wandering off and sticking forks in plugs and pulling the dog's tail and putting their finger up the cat's bum? Is this some sort of playpen to keep them in check? And why does it look like a blue waffle? Yes, a waffle that is blue. And if you're laughing at me saying the words blue and waffle together, you're definitely a terrible person who used the internet too much in the early 2000s. Anyway, blue waffle, ew. So yes, the steel cage in wrestling. The kayfabe or storyline reason for a steel cage match is to settle a feud where the villain of the piece, or heel, keeps legging it from the hero or getting his mates involved. It is, or at least was, a violent structure where two opponents go at it until only one man is left on the soles of his feet, and that usually closed the feud. The steel cage match dates back as far as 1937 in a match in Atlanta, Georgia, and has evolved at many points during that time. It used to be chicken wire, then it was bars, now it's chain link. The WWF has put many of its legendary figures behind the bars in its time, from Bruno Sammartino to Andre the Giant, from Hulk Hogan to Randy Savage, from Stone Cold to The Rock, from Brock Lesnar to Cody Rhodes. In WWF or WWE rules, you can win the match by normal methods, be they via pinfall or submission, or by escaping the cage via climbing over the top. Or, for the less adventurous, just leave out the door. What was once one of the key, exciting and rare gimmick matches in the 70s, 80s and early 90s has since lost a bit of its lustre, a bit of its magic, as matches in cells, elimination chambers and bouts involving all manner of household objects and strange rooms around the arena, well, they've become the norm. They've become commonplace in your average weekly programming on both the WWE and its chief rival, AEW. Despite this, though, the unforgiving structure still remains an exciting prospect when it's clamped onto the ring apron, even though it's chain link now. I say bring back the blue waffle, you cowards. And please don't Google that if you don't know. You will regret it. WWF Wrestlemania Steel Cage Challenge was released in 1993 by LJN in America and Acclaim in the UK on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Sega Master System and the Sega Game Gear. Sculptured Software took the programming reins on the Nintendo machine, with the Sega versions, which are nigh on identical, being crafted by Flying Edge. The style of the game has moved on from the cartoony nature of LJN's previous two NES titles, with the graphical style, the viewpoint and the animation taking strong inspiration from the 16-bit WWF titles of the era, those being Super WrestleMania, Royal Rumble and WWF Raw, albeit massively stripped down due to the obvious technological and controller handicaps that the previous generations of consoles had. Much like their bigger brothers, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Mega Drive versions, the two 8-bit iterations had their own distinctive rosters, with only Bret Hart, IRS, Hulk Hogan, Ted DiBiase, The Undertaker and, ooh yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage making an appearance in both versions. The Nintendo version had Jake Roberts, The Mountie, Roddy Piper and Sid Justice as exclusives.
And I have half the brain that you do!
While the Game Gear and Sega Master System versions turned them away on the entrance ramp and instead beckoned to Tonka, Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair and Papa Shango along to join in the ruckus instead. If you remember playing as the Ultimate Warrior or Razor Ramon, you definitely didn't do that in the 1990s. You may have done it in 2018, as for some reason they released this game as its own exclusive plug-in TV console. No doubt piggybacking off the classic mini console boom of the late 2010s. That game is based on the Nintendo version of this, but with, as I said, the Ultimate Warrior and Razor Ramon added, with the Mountie and Hulk Hogan being removed. Why was Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in wrestling of the era, replaced by the Ultimate Warrior? Well, possibly due to the rights, but maybe because Hulk Hogan was persona non grata in the mid-2010s after making a few less than savoury comments about people of colour. So they hoiked him out and swapped him for the guy who made homophobic comments in the 2000s instead, because the wrestling world is a strange place and you get sin bin for a bit for being a dick, before they realise they can still make money selling your t-shirts to nostalgic dads again, as if nothing happened. You only get cancelled until they need a surprise Royal Rumble appearance or a Hall of Fame headliner. Anyway, the TV games console was a strange concept, especially given how poor the game itself is compared to even most other home wrestling games at the time. Yes, the ones I've described as being pretty bad, even by LJN's own stable of wrestling horror. Yes, Steel Cage Challenge is not a good piece of digital grappling at all, I'm afraid. The 16-bit games on which these are based upon aren't incredibly strong to start off with, if I'm being honest. And seeing these already basic brawlers pared down even further isn't the best recipe for success. Is it the hardware? I don't think that's much of an excuse, given that Pro Wrestling and Tecmo World Wrestling were on the NES. Both of these are terrific wrestling games. Hell, even WWF Wrestling Challenge, as basic as that game is more fun than this. Options are limited in terms of match types. You can have a one-on-one match, a steel cage match, a run at the WWF title where you defeat all the other wrestlers, a tag match, and you can have a go at winning the tag team belts as well, potentially reforming these two fellas as the Mega Powers. But that's it. No other match types or modes are beyond this. But to be fair, wrestling games with far less options, including the three previously mentioned NES titles, have very few options either. So this is really not a deal breaker for wrestling games of this era. They could make up for it, of course, with the gameplay itself. And yeah, this game doesn't do that. The range of moves, perhaps governed by its desire to keep to the look and feel of the LGN efforts on the 16-bit consoles, combined with the lack of memory and buttons, are limited with a capital L. There are not many moves in this game at all. Not only that, there's no wrestler-specific moves, so every character from the towering Undertaker to the cowardly Ric Flair, they all play exactly the same. On top of the limited movesets, it all handles so clunky too. It's a real effort to do a decent move with the controller, and just like its big brother, It's not really skill or strategy based, it's more of a button basher. Even the main attraction of the game, the steel cage, is barely playable. It's just the same as the normal match, but it's difficult to convince your wrestler to shuffle his way up the cage, and just having an opponent stand up after you've felled him and you've tried to vault the cage will see your character dismount guiltily like he's been caught trying to climb over a fence to scrump some apples by the local village policeman. Presentation, to be fair, is pretty decent. Well, at least it starts off that way. There's some passable 8-bit chiptune interpretations of the wrestlers' themes when you're selecting your character, and good old Howard Finkel is on hand to introduce your wrestlers to the ring. When you get to the match on the NES version, though, the glitz and colour of that era's razzmatazz is replaced by a dire look that has all the life and colour of a 70s BBC News interview with some Durham housewives talking about gravy. It looks dull and bleak and tawdry. The Sega Master System and Game Gear versions definitely have the edge in the looks department, even though your favourite fighters have been given the sort of heads that would see them get bullied at school from primary to secondary, probably to further education. Their first job, their second job, they've got big heads is what I'm saying. But to quote famous grump Jim Cornette, they are slicker than come off a gold tooth compared to the NES version, in a move sure to excite us Europeans who all bought the wrong 8-bit console in our droves from Dixon's rather than the NES. I would say I'm kidding, but I played Alf recently. So yeah, given that the Game Gear version is the same as the Master System one, I'm going to sort of rope them in with this analogy. If you imagine the NES and the Master System ones to be the rockers, the NES one is Marty Jannetty, unquestionably so, and the Shawn Michaels is the Sega version. Only that analogy is not right, as the rockers were quite good. So take that analogy and apply it to, I don't know, Mosh and Thrash in the Headbangers or something, I guess. Anyway, this game is a tawdry effort on all the formats it's on. One to avoid. Sega Zone reviewed it in their issue 9, giving it a 65 and summing up thusly: like getting to grips with hot sweaty men? Then this is the game for you. If not, avoid. Games reviewing's not really changed because I do that as well, don't I? Going about hot sweaty men. Anyway, Sega Master Force reviewed it in their issue 1, giving it a score of 53 and explaining that it's an above average game that will only appeal to die-hard WWF fans. They also make a really huge error by using a picture of the Ultimate Warrior and saying he's one of your opponents in the game. That isn't true at all, you liars, not unless you're playing the 2018 TV game, in which case you're time travellers and you need to get back to the 90s, because there's nothing good in this era. So, WWF Wrestlemania Steel Cage Challenge. Quite frankly, you'll probably get more enjoyment from looking up the Blue Waffle in person. Like, subscribe, and K thanks. Ew.